crossed.
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully that will last for the rest of the meeting. We won't have any more hiccups. So just before opening the meeting, can I just ask if any members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device mute it to avoid feedback? I think we've sorted that one. And anybody in remote attendance, please keep your camera and microphone off unless they wish to speak, and ideally not to use the camera facility at all, as this can affect the quality of the meeting. This meeting will be recorded, and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the council's website. So welcome everybody to this standards committee meeting, including members in attendance remotely. We don't have any independent persons in attendance. And we are also joined by the monitoring officer, Robin Harris, and Joe Millard from Democratic Services. There is no planned evacuation this evening, so if the alarm sounds, we will all have to safely exit the building into the car park. Lifts must not be used. And is there anyone here in attendance who would require assistance to leave? No. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Jays. I think it's online. Yep. Councillor Last and Councillor Winklis, who'll be substituted this evening by Councillor Watson and Councillor Harrison. Mr. Webb and the Calc Rep, Jeff Tutt, have both given their apologies. Patricia Richards was hoping to be here, but obviously is not here at this moment in time.
Okay.
Yeah, apologies.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully he's too poorly with that. Okay, moving on to item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of February 2023, minute numbers 624 to 628, and the 17th of May 2023, minute numbers 33 to 34. Are members happy to approve these as correct records? Okay. Moving on to item 4, are there any declarations of interest? Okay, moving on to item 5, which is the monitoring officer annual report. Over to monitoring officer Robin.
Very much, Chair and evening members. I trust everyone's had the opportunity to read the report before this evening's meeting. So I'm just to give you a brief little bit of background in relation to it. The previous monitoring officer produced this report annually in November, and indeed had done so up until 2021. For reasons I don't know, he didn't produce a report in 2022. And then I subsequently became the monitoring officer in April 2023. And so what I've done with this report is I've done the period from January through to December 2023, and all things being equal, if I'm still a monitoring officer next year, then I will go back to his timing for the November standards committee, or we'll time the date of the report such as that we get it effectively at the end of the year. We do a year of that whole period, even if that might cover a certain amount of the same period of this report. We'll see what time that meeting comes around next year. So I won't bore you by reading through the report if you've already read it, but I'm very happy to take any questions you might have on it.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Some time ago and religiously on an annual basis, I used to suggest that the Standards Committee write up to the government, whatever Secretary of State it is, to say, yeah, thanks very much for the powers you've given us, we need a bit more power to our elbow, in a nice legalistic way, of course. Have we been doing that recently?
So in respect of that issue, obviously the Committee on Standards and Public Life did a substantial review of the matter and put forward a substantial number of recommendations to the government. The government then sat on them for a couple of years and responded, I think it was back in 2021, but effectively saying that we're not going to change anything. So regrettably, notwithstanding the fact that the sector, as well as potentially previously Swellborough Council, were asking the government for more powers in respect of standards, in particular in respect of, I think, sanctions whereby there are breaches. But unfortunately, that's within the gift of the government. We can't do anything further than that without the law being changed. And on the face of it, notwithstanding substantial lobbying from the sector, the government isn't minded to do anything.
No, but with respect, Chair, that shouldn't stop us keep repeating the message. And if everyone repeated the message, they might give in and do something. All the time they think, oh, well, they've patted us on the head and said, no chance of nothing's going to happen. But we are not the only council in the country. I would suspect 638 of us think that there should be more power to our elbows on this matter. So the more we keep reminding them that there are issues, the more likely they are to actually do something in the end. That was my point when I kept raising it. Other members may think that's just ignore it.
I mean, obviously, ultimately, you could pose, obviously, this report's for information only, but you could nevertheless ask that on behalf of the committee, that we write to the government and express our concern with the absence of, in particular, I think, I presume that's the thing that you're particularly concerned about. It's what most people are concerned about, is the absence of sanctions
Yes.
in the regime. But then it's not for me to do that without the.
I'm happy to propose that then, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I'll
Second.
second.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, so you were just going to second, or did you
No,
want
no,
to speak about this?
No, I was going to ask a question.
Oh, right, no problem.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go to vote.
All right. So that's the one.
I was going to say, prior to the government should be our MPs as well, because I completely agree with the issue, but our MPs need to know that we are
I agree with
concerned
that,
and they
yeah.
should do that. So
Okay. So it's writing
at
to,
least the MP's been copied into the letter and it made aware.
so it's writing to the relevant department and copying in the local MP. Okay. So we go to a vote on that.
I'm sure it is that the people that proposed and seconded it are happy with you, but because that's effectively what's suggested.
They were nodding, so
Yeah.
so I'll take it that
Are
you're
people
not.
are people allowed to put their hands up?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we do need to check online. Actually, apologies for that, Councillor Baldock. Would you like to speak?
That's all right. Yeah, I just think something like this should really go to full council. It's Councillor Harrison suggests it's been a long-standing position of the council. I'm not sure that a vote has been taken on that. Certainly not for a while. So it would seem to be something that ought to go to full council to get a approval and potentially strengthen its position depending on how it goes. But yeah.
So I suppose alternatively it could be a sort of motion to full council to seek the backing of full council. I don't know what you think about that, Councillor Harrison.
Where do the minutes of this, is this a standalone committee? It doesn't have to be approved by full council.
These are just minutes for noting, aren't they?
Also, and the reports of information only. Isn't it?
Yes.
They come back to the minutes, come back to this meeting, but I
Yeah.
don't think it's council.
Well, we can do another one at full council. I'm quite happy to do it 2 or 3 times a year because that's what it needs to keep hammering the message home. But I'm quite happy that we just send it from this committee in the meantime.
Councillor Hunt.
I was going to say, all groups are represented in this committee, so I don't see it making a difference on full council, just making more work and some else report being done or motion written, and it's the same outcome.
I mean, I'm happy for there to be a vote on that because obviously it's prompted by this annual report, which is obviously reporting to this committee. So if you would still like to obviously take that to a vote, that's your proposal, Councillor Harrison, I'm happy to take a vote on that. Did anybody else wish to speak about this proposal? Yes, this is a recommendation that basically, that, you know, from noting this report, that we would like, as a committee, to write to the government, copying in the MPs, about the lack of more substantial powers in a standards regime that exists in local government at the moment. Is that a correct summary?
Recommendation that this committee agrees to.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right to government.
Thanks. I'm going to bring it up now because I think it's probably relevant to that particular case. So I wear hats elsewhere, and I can see that where there are more substantial measures, but I do think there are more substantial measures that equally needs to be a ability for a councillor to call on independent advice, and that would have to be independent legal advice, separate from the councils, funded by the council, because they are a holder of public office in the capacity of that entity. And I'd like to see a copy of the officers and directors liability insurance that goes with that covers councillors as well. Because there are some capacities in which we are a legal official. So I'm thinking company directors, etc. And we should be not hung out to dry while serving council.
You feel like there needs to be additional safeguards?
There needs to be additional safeguards and independent advice.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with the principle of what you're saying necessarily, but I'm not sure that that necessarily falls within the remit of this report and the letter that is being proposed by Councillor Harrison. It's not an area necessarily where I have the greatest expertise, but I do understand that members do benefit from an indemnity when they are acting in their capacity as a councillor. But again, the example you are giving, which is a salient one because people have been burned by it in the past, is when, for example, the council puts the person onto a company as a director, or, for example, puts a person onto a charity, and they become a trustee, and then things rise out of that appointment, which is not necessarily them acting in the council capacity, but acting in the capacity of a director or trustee, and, you know, understanding what's, you know, their responsibilities under those particular functions. I think arguably that might be a wider council matter. I'm not sure it's immediately within the gift of this
No.
committee to deal with it.
And I suppose, yeah, we've got Councillor Palmer in a moment, but I was just concerned, I suppose some of that could be something that would need to be considered based on the response that we would get in any case. So we've got Councillor Palmer, then Councillor Perkins.
I mean, I've looked at the standards report by Parliament, and some of the concerns that they had is once you introduce tougher or sanctions, then it gives the right of appeal, or should do. It invokes the Human Rights Act, and therefore that may be a bit more burdensome on councils. So I think sometimes we make decisions without looking at the background. And maybe what we should do is to get the correspondence right, is to make sure that next meeting we have sight of that report, people read that report, and then fully informed. The letter could be drafted as prescribed by Andrew, which I think was a very good after suggestion. And I think if you go off half-cocked, we don't get the result that you want.
If I can follow that up, so my experience had set that actually where that was implemented and went down that path in that instance, it cost that particular entity millions of pounds. So it is because you end up with barristers, legal advice, and really substantial issues around reputational issues. And I don't have a problem with greater sanctions, but it comes with an enormous cost attached to it and reputational issues for the individual as well as for that particular entity.
Councillor Perkins.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's probably, on looking at situations where councillors are appointed to outside bodies, there's probably LGA advice around that, I would imagine. Like, I don't see, we're not going to be the only council where that happens, where there's going to be potential standards issues. So it's probably worth looking at the LGA legal advice on how that's dealt with.
Councillor Hunt.
I was going to say, well, we outside bodies, and then we've just gone through it. I'd say that's recently, we've done that with, all the outside bodies have to make sure that they've got all the stuff in place anyway.
Yeah, I didn't mean that's the body, I meant like.
No, but it said elsewhere as well, but the director companies, that's, but then that seems to me that's a separate thing. You're appointed as a director to an outside company or organisation. But it does seem to be a separate thing to get from what we're saying here about the standards and sanctions on it.
Okay, well, obviously having heard, you know, all the contributions, Councillor Harrison, do you still wish to put forward a
Yeah.
recommendation? And so Councillor Watson, you still want to second that? Okay, well then we will go to a vote. Do you just want to clarify again, Councillor Harrison, so that everybody knows what the vote is, what you're, you know,
That we write to the relevant Secretary of State and the local, copy in the two local MPs along the lines of our previous submission and that of the other 639 councils in the country, to say that we understand your view, but we still think you need to look at this again in terms of sanctions.
okay. Right. And so you're happy to second that, Councillor Watson? Okay, should we go to a vote on that recommendation? All those in favour of that? All those against? Any abstentions? I think that's everybody. Okay, that's adopted as a recommendation. Councillor Palmer.
The questions, 4.1 of the report.
Yeah.
It mentions about parliamentary legislation, which is 100% correct. If we don't comply with the legislation, we'd be acting unlawfully. It also says, and the Constitution. So I'd like to know what the legal status is of the Constitution. And at point 10.1.
Should we do the one thing at a time? Right?
Okay,
We have a list. So the Constitution is the document which sets out how the council delegates its various powers and duties across the various different, and if in this case across the council, across the committees, and to officers, and it is legally required to have a constitution.
What's the legal weight of the Constitution? If something takes place that isn't constitutionally acceptable, it breaches the Constitution, is that an unlawful process?
It depends. Right, so it's a matter of fact and degree. Just by way of one example, we know, because you and I know in the Constitution Working Group, that there are errors in the Constitution, and we have found errors, and so where we have found errors, we have corrected them. But you know, equally there are things which are probably still in there, which are errors which we haven't found yet, which hopefully we will, and we'll have it perfect. You know, the Constitution is an iterative document. You go through it, you find things that don't work or are wrong, and you change them.
Okay. At 1.1, it mentions about member training and development. And I feel it's quite obvious that when standards committee was being cancelled because there's no agenda, that would have been an excellent opportunity to enhance members' knowledge and train and development by using that period of time, which everyone had set aside. Because I think it is important that people realise it's great saying we need greater sanction, but I think members need to know what is actually the code of conduct. What are the limits that is acceptable in a political speech? What is the Localism Act, and what does Section 28 and Section 27 of the Localism Act, what does that actually mean when it comes to standards and that? So I think it's a shame that we haven't had really much training on this, and I think it's a bad reflection. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, I think certainly something that we can take forward is looking at more training for members of standards. So that is something that we can note. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, we do have a member development working group who are supposed to, made up cross-party, who are supposed to come up with ideas for what training should take place in the council. And every single member of the council, as far as I'm aware, can feed into their rep on that and say, yeah, could you put this forward? Could you put that forward? And that's how it happens.
Yeah.
I know because I've done it in the past.
Yeah.
So that's the forum that we agreed as councillors over the years for our training and development.
Yeah. And this point has come up at other committee meetings recently, though, about the fact that that doesn't, that needs a bit more impetus for members. Councillor Perkin.
Yeah, I agree. Always a wasted opportunity. When, you know, as a committee over the last couple of years, we've looked at our development and what that should look like and being more proactive in terms of training. Yes, there's a members working group, but is it not still the position of the council? Is it not still the kind of auspice of the committee to look at its own development and your own members and not have to go through another committee to get that done? I think that's perfectly within our gift as a committee. So we would like some training on this. Because not all councillors are going to understand the role of being on the standards committee and potentially being pulled into a panel. Would all councillors benefit from that? Probably. But I can understand why the councillors that aren't going to get called onto a potential panel wouldn't prioritise that. So probably it makes more sense to look at what could our training structure be over a period of time, over say the next year as a committee, and how we're going to fit that in as a group rather than it being kind of signposted through another working group.
Yeah. Just if I may, sorry, thank you, Chair. That I was minded to suggest an item of any other business for this committee, as we have a relatively light agenda this evening, to discuss what training you would like in this committee. So
yeah,
yeah,
okay,
with your permission, then.
Yeah, no, I think that's entirely fair. And I think what Councillor Perkins said is that this committee should take ownership in terms of its training needs, and also determining what would be helpful from more experienced members as well for newer members to take on board, with the option for that to be broadened out, because obviously committee makeups change all the time as well. So it is worthwhile. So yeah, we'll take that under any other business. So were there any other questions on this item? Yes.
I have the same way to ask for a members development working group. Has that met since May? Is there a green rep on it?
I can answer that. It hasn't met because just before all the new members came on board, there was a big training plan already put in place for all new members, and there's been a lot of training for everybody at the very beginning. But only last week, Billy and I spoke about this, and it's been resurrected.
I guess we'll get something to.
Yes.
Good.
Not that I want to be on another working group.
No.
Okay, were there any other questions from members on that? No. So can I just ask then that members agreed that this report is noted?
Yeah, and we say it's noted, but we'd like to move forward with some training.
Yes. Yeah.
Is our recommendation.
Yep. Okay. Then we move to item 6, which is on the member officer protocol.
Under the Local Government Act 1972. Now, I'm surprised that there's no background papers on this, because at 3.1 there's been a lot of consultation with VMD, S&T, CLT, and trade unions and more staff. You'd think that there's some sort of feedback that we could look at to see what brought up. And I would have thought that some of this would have been background papers, would have been advice from the Local Government Association. And I think background papers, as we were talking earlier about legal requirements in section 100D of the Local Government Act, you should put the background papers available that have been used on a report. And I think it's a sad reflection that it's not on the report, that there's no background papers. Thank you.
So if I may, the purpose of the background papers, Mark, is to list the documents that you relied on when writing the report. And there wasn't any other documents I relied on when writing the report, and therefore on that basis, there are no background papers.
Okay, thank you for that, because I thought there was a lot of comment in the agenda, in the appendix, that actually is one of the documents on the page of the Local Government Association and its guidance and members protocol.
That isn't the content of the report. That's the appendix to the report.
Okay.
Would you?
I was going to introduce the report. I think I've already got questions, but I mean, obviously, some people have been on committee who are familiar with this already.
Yeah,
Yeah, no.
you want to go to the report, that's fine.
I was only going to do a very brief, similar to the previous one, that I trust that
If we could have that first, just for the benefit of everybody.
members have read the report and viewed the appendix and had a think about it. And I did update this has been to the committee on a number of times previously and has also been discussed at EMT, CLT, and been provided to the trade union and indeed all staff to make comments on, and is currently in a position to be recommended to full council for adoption, should this committee choose to do so. But other than that, I will very happy to take any questions.
Councillor Perkins.
So, appreciate that it's been to all of those different groups, and it's a broad agreement that that the content of the report, the content of the policy is acceptable across the board.
I think it's one of those things whereby, in truth, notwithstanding the fact there's been a very wide consultation,
Yeah.
is that there was perhaps a disappointing amount of feedback on it. There wasn't a great deal of commentary on it. I think it is one of those things whereby until you actually have something working in practice, it's quite hard to comment on it, because a lot of things seem like a good idea in theory, and then you put them into practical use and then you see whether they work or not. And so there was not an immense amount of feedback in respect of all of those different consultations. There was nothing that said absolutely no, don't do it. Broadly, I'd say it was supported by this committee previously, and indeed by the officers groups that it was put to. But there wasn't a great deal of change to the document during the course of the progress through the various different consultations.
Councillor Palmer.
Yes, I think it's a fair point. There has been consultation, and I think it says the last time it was at the committee was September 2022,
Yes.
which is before the change of the new administration. And again, I think it could have come back to a committee earlier, rather than put it in and say, we need this decision. And I think it would be nice to see what the staff and what senior management can. And I think there should be a more open discussion. I don't think this report is ready. I do feel, and I've had feedback from my members when I've raised it with them and showed them, and some of the feedback is that it seems to be a one-sided. One comment I had was, well, it seems to be saying about bullying from members, but it doesn't say about bullying from officers. And I feel that there's the code of conduct, that's in place. I don't feel that this is really necessary at the moment without further discussion.
So in response to politics,
Yes,
so in response to that, in actual fact, so the previous committee instructed me to send this out to consultation and then bring it back with a view to going to council. So I'm following the committee's instructions in relation to how it has gone through that process. And then with regard to, for example, you mentioned the code of conduct. The code of conduct, which, as you know, is based on the LGA model code of conduct, refers to the council's officer member protocol. It assumes that you have one. And so in actual fact that the council doesn't have one, but I think that the fact that it didn't have one was the reason why some time ago when this first was in the offing at this committee with the membership of this committee, that they wanted one in order to dovetail in with the code of conduct that was adopted.
Yeah, just to come back on that, I completely agree with that. As previous chair, that's exactly how it went. There was also, some discussion around the LGA peer review and the fact that our member relationship is not where it should be. So there was some intent there to try and create better relationships, which I think is really important for us as an organisation. I agree with Councillor Palmer that it would have been helpful to kind of understand the staff's view on it. But also that if there's been no kind of structural disagreement in it, or if there's been, tweaks that have been able to put through, then it's better that we recommend that to council as a document that can then be changed further down the line should that not work in practice, than not having one for another kind of 6 months to a year, which is how long these things take, really.
Just quickly, Councillor Hunt.
I'm just going to agree. So I'd like to see, well, I would hope that some of the officers actually welcome having it and actually seeing those things come back to say, yeah, we're pleased that this is happening, which would be good. But I agree that we should have something in place now. It has been a long time talking about it, and it needed to actually get it through and get it all sorted.
Yeah, Councillor Bonham.
Yeah, I suppose the question is, it does feel very heavy. So you want to put balance in place, and I totally get that, to have a good working relationship. But it seems very biased against the members and in favour of the officers. So what can be done to make that more equitable balance? Because at the moment I don't see it is.
Fine, just
Yeah.
respond. So the people who had first dibs at this, and people who were in the initial creation of the document, was this committee. And it only went to officers after this committee had it. So it's not as though someone has come along and gone, oh, let's make it more pro-officer. I mean, whether or not, I think it actually is a fair comment to say that in relation to the balance, if you think of the employer-employee balance, for example, the employer is in the position of strength. And so therefore there are protections for employees. And actually, for what it's worth, in relation to the member-officer relationship, the member is in a position of strength because actually they are the senior executive level type person in the council. And indeed, actually, if, under employment law, there is a duty of care for members to have regard to their officers as though they were their employee. So in my view, I think it is balanced, and I think it sets out the different responsibilities and roles of each party, and they are different. But I would say that if there is the perception that it isn't balanced, it's possibly because actually you are addressing a situation whereby one of those parties is in a position of power and the other party isn't.
Yeah, just quickly, Councillor Palmer, quickly, you did want to indicate, so.
Well, I think Councillor Perkins hit the nail on the head sometimes. And I said earlier, it's better to get something right the first time than to keep rewriting it. The Constitution didn't get it right, so we've got to rewrite it. We need to get this right. I don't think in the form that it is right, but my question would also be, who has the power? Thank you.
Right, okay, Councillor Baldock has indicated online.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a nonsense to suggest that we have power over officers. We have, for the last 5 years, I haven't seen any instance where members have power over officers. I think that, to portray that as being being the real situation really is quite alarming. There is no way in which a member can make an officer do something, can use a position of power over an officer. To me, it seems that quite often officers have the power and they can exert it as they choose. So I really think that there is an imbalance in this document that needs to be looked at, and this assumption that members have power over officers. I hear what Robin says. There may be all these theoretical positions, but quite frankly, it doesn't reflect reality. And I think that if we're going to introduce something like this, we need to have a position of equality and equal respect between members and officers, and not have it portrayed as a one-sided relationship, which this does.
Thank you, Councillor Perkin.
I just want to say that with respect, this has been out to members previously. Members have been asked about it, and there was no kind of huge significant disagreement at that point. And it's now gone through SMT, it's gone through EMT, it's gone through all levels of staff that it needed to make it a proper consultation. Staff have also said there's no major disagreement here. But let's just get on with it.
Councillor Hunt.
I was going to say, I think what seems to be forgotten is this is seeming like it's one-sided because we're dealing with this particular issue of members and officers. It already stands that there's something with officers. If Robin calls me a name or something, I'm going to put in a complaint. He's going to lose his job. So there's already things with officers in place that there's going to be consequences if things are done, and there's something in there to say how members are also working with officers. So as has been said, we've been talking about it for a long time, and we said I think we should get this through move forward with it.
If that's the case, then I think what it should do, that mechanism you described should be clearly embedded in this.
Is that mechanism not clearly described within the complaints process though?
You shouldn't have it in separate document. Should all be in one, CV.
But this is clear attached to the code of conduct, isn't it? Which has complaints process within that.
But the mechanism for the control, so what we're looking at is the bit between us and officers. And the mirror image you normally see is the other way around as well.
Yeah.
So where would you go to? So this document should point you to exactly where you find that. It's no good saying it's in a document somewhere, God knows where, because our documents are all over the place. You need to be able to pick that up, so a member can pick it up and say, I've got this, is it me? Or am I going down the route of, I fundamentally disagree with what's been going on with an officer, and needs to see what the mechanism is that, you know, deals with that side, I suppose.
I was just say, in response to the document refers to both the member code of conduct and the officer code of conduct. So, and it also describes around paragraph 2, what members can expect from officers as well as what officers can expect from members. So there's
And they are absolute mirror images of what's in the other document. Because I don't have a copy of the other document.
2.12.
thank you.
Does that, I'm asking, is because I haven't got a copy of the other document.
So it doesn't repeat verbatim what's in the officer code of conduct in the same way that what officers can expect from members doesn't repeat verbatim what the member code of conduct says, because they are separate standalone documents, which, I mean, again, in particular relation to the member code of conduct, is obliged to be had by law. So you can't easily roll it up into another document. But to answer your point, you're saying, how does a member complain about an officer? In my view, the document tells you how to do that. Directs you to an officer code of conduct, which exists in the Constitution the same way the member one does. So it's balanced.
Are there any other? Yeah, Councillor Lehman, sorry, just quickly.
Are you going to carry on talking about what we're?
No, it's a different subject.
Okay, so we'll just quickly come to Councillor Lehman.
I was waiting because there was a lot of high level comments and mine are very content based comments. Firstly, there's a few references throughout the protocol to chairman and vice chairman. And I was wondering if they could be amended to chairs and vice chairs, please.
I'm happy to do that if that's what folks want. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And then just a couple of questions on details. Paragraph 2.7. Just for my own benefit to clarify that, where a personal relationship has been disclosed, those concerns should be avoided a situation where conflict could be perceived. Specifically, a member should not sit on a body or participate in any decision which directly affects the officer on a personal basis. So in the first sentence here, is that specifically talking about where an officer has disclosed or has a personal relationship with a member? Or
yes, I think that's what that paragraph is, supposing that there is a member officer relationship.
yeah,
Not just the wider relationship as in a particular. Yes,
just wanted to clarify that.
relationship.
And then paragraph 5.8, I thought the first sentence here, any council information provided to a member must only be used by the member in connection with the proper performance of the member's duties. It then goes on to say confidential information, blah, blah, blah. But I think that first sentence, I think the word confidential could be in that first sentence as well, because
Yes.
that seems overly, yeah.
I think that's actually the intention of that paragraph.
I thought it was, but just clarity.
Because obviously
Yeah.
invariably you're going to have information which you need to use, aren't you? So,
Exactly.
so yeah, I think that would be helpful if I were clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Palmer.
Well, if we look at the recommendations, and I think it's right, because recommendation 3 is to refer it to full council where it falls out the opportunity to raise comments and et cetera, et cetera. I think recommendation 2, delegate the authority to the monitoring officer to make the final amendments to text. I don't know if that's a bit too broad. I take it that means any final amendments that are made at council or here, not what are completely change it. And consider whether the draft article is fit for purpose. I'm not 100% sure that's correct, but I think that could be correct with council. But if you try the link to the local government association works fine. Opens up and you can read the document. You click the other links to the internal documents on our webpage,
That's it.
get an error, 404. So it would be nice to have the links correctly in place. And also, I think it would be, going back to what Councillor Burton said, I'd like to know when it was discussed and when there was the consultation. It says September 22 here, in discussion with officers. What other committees was it discussed at? How was it set out to members? And I'd like to see some feedback in the document to what the trade union, what the EMT, because if we're making an informed decision on an officer member protocol, then we should know what the feedback is on both sides. But that could be decided at full council or listed for full council. So that's part of the amendments, I think.
So just very quickly, because I'm just going to ask you to come back about that point around the question about recommendation 2.
Yeah.
Question about that. And yeah, so we take that first.
Yeah, so in actual fact, the purpose of that recommendation was that the things that are said this evening in relation to this document, I can then make, because on the one side of things, it's described as a final draft, but then things have already been said this evening, oh, actually that, and, you know, for example, I think the links, check the links word it. If you, I mean, and if you think that I would just go and rewrite it in how I would want it, but if it's something that concerns you, then yes, your agreed amendments is absolutely fine.
Change that. Just very quickly as well, I was going to suggest then, if this is as per the recommendation to go to full council, could we arrange that there is a briefing beforehand that explores this with people, and then that request for that information around some of those responses is part of that briefing, so that when people go into that, they are fully aware of everything that is within this before then going to vote for it.
I'm happy to take that on board just as a comment and act on it. We need to.
Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, I was going to say, I might have misheard Councillor Perkin, but I thought she said that they were working on this last year and she was chair, and this has been a long time coming. And it went to Tom, Dick and Harriet for comments. And this is the problem where we're running on a 4-year cycle, that people, oh, well, I wasn't here then, so I want to rerun the whole issue. I don't think we should. I'm quite happy with this. What I would say as a technophobe is we used to have the whole lot, including the appendices, in a folder. So you could look at the code of conduct and then you had the appendices with it. Yeah. And I've probably still got the old ones somewhere. It was extremely useful. Now I know we're trying to cut down on the planet, saving the trees and all the rest of it.
It's not just
but some of those online stuff I don't find extremely easy to find. As I say, I know we're, you know, technological and all the rest of it going forward, but where you had a folder sitting on the side and you could, you know, I did used to read it at bedtime, but it was very easy to read and it was all in the same place. So I would just make that comment in terms of where you can go on that and then come out of that and then, oh yeah, go on to that appendix here, oh, and then come out of that and go on to that. I don't find our website, in terms of what I used to have in a black folder, very easy to read. It also had the financial standing orders as well and all the rest of it. And I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Perkin.
Hi.
No, okay. Councillor.
Yeah, I'd agree with that because I've asked for this before, and I think actually every member should have a copy that they can annotate and mark up. And I have to say, electronic copies like this, I mean, this is a classic case. Go to the officer, whatever, you can't get it because it's broken. So, you know, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot by setting all this up and you can't access it. So I think actually just give everyone a hard copy and make it so this is really a useful thing to have. And the same for the Constitution. If you want people to abide by all of this stuff.
That was in there as well.
Yeah.
Black folder.
Yeah, it was, and you could follow it, and you could you had it to hand. It's so much easier when you're debating and you've got something to hand. I can't do it on left things, etc. So if that can be a recommendation from this committee, that once it's finalised, that we all end up with a final bound copy of it that's given out to members.
Yeah. Joe?
Doesn't have to be bound, but you know.
Yeah, I think I just want to talk about the constitution.
Yeah.
With all the changes, regular changes, it's almost as soon as it's been printed, it's almost out of date. So that is the big issue with
I
it.
think we need to draw a line in the sand. Okay. I mean, we used, you know, I remember the day for the file packs and you get the replacement pages. But it is really difficult to follow that. And, or we sort out the website, which tonight on an iPad, we can't even get rid of the blooming cookies. You know, are we going to sort out the website and have something that works properly? Or we go back to having this, but I think we do need something to hand.
Go around Dangerous and get rid of folders.
She's got a whole excellent one, celebrate one for each, every one of us.
Councillor Perkin, you to get, yeah.
This is not something that we can upload onto Northern Gov or whatever we've got.
It was something I was thinking of as you, as
Yeah, just like, I absolutely don't want another folder and stuff. If everyone else does, great, but like I 100% will chat that. But if it could be some, I think Monique's right, like if we've got the links, they should absolutely work, shouldn't they? And actually, if we can link within that, this is where that is, this is where it is, then it's in one place and we're really capable of make the most of that platform.
yeah.
Okay, so where are we with these recommendations?
So on recommendation to delegate authority to the monitoring officer to make any final amendments as discussed in this meeting.
Yeah.
And then could we have circulated to us afterwards the background information that was arrived at, you know, the consultations, because I think everyone's interested to see that. Don't think that's a problem to email that to all the community members.
Any agreed final amendments?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And subject to that, were there any other people wanting to propose? No, okay. So do I have a proposer for those? Yeah, Councillor Harrison, a seconder. Yeah, Councillor Miller. Okay, all those in favour of those recommendations? Any against? I think that was everyone. No abstentions. Okay. Now we move to item 7 on the agenda, which is a verbal item.
Indeed, I'm really bored of sound of my voice now, I'm sure I am. It was just an observation that I had, that having updated the code of conduct in February 2023 to the LGA model code, the council didn't at the same time update the arrangements that it uses for code of conduct complaints. At the present time, they are across a number of different places rather than being in one place. And whether or not this group would like me to go away and look at a new set of arrangements for code of conduct complaint handling, which would be consistent with the LGA model code that we have as our code of conduct. So there's nothing wrong with our arrangements per se, but in the realm of moving on and improving, we changed our code of conduct. It'd probably be helpful to change our arrangements so that it's more consistent with the code of conduct. And whilst the LGA don't produce a model set of arrangements, they do give guidance on what the arrangement should contain, which say our current arrangements largely reflect, but it could be updated. So that was it really.
Okay,
Any comments?
Councillor Harrison.
Okay, I'm not normally here, but we don't know what we don't know. So members can't ask you to do something if they don't need it. No, it needs to be done. And that's half the trouble with this constitution and stuff. If you've got new members who don't know what it was before, then they don't know that it needs changing to how it is now, if that makes sense. So I would say to the monitoring officer, just come along with if there's any of these suggestions, by the way, you change this, but you never changed that. Are you happy that I change it and fetch it back to you? Well, hopefully everybody would be, because if we don't know that it needs to be changed to be brought back to us, we can't suggest it. Well, I say we, I'm not on it, as you know. So I would just say that if that's if that's a recommendation from the monitoring officer for today, I'm quite happy to propose it. But for the future, I would suggest that he just signs it on the agenda and says, right, here's another one that didn't get changed when you changed that. Are you happy that I work on it? So that we know what you're working on. Otherwise, you could be beavering away on something that nobody's bothered about. Well, in the grand scheme of things, you know what I mean? Yeah,
Okay, councillor Bonny.
Yeah, and I suppose it's about that, and the forward agenda is about having a list of whatever the policies are that apply to standards, all the different ones, when they were last updated and when they're due to be. So it's carrying on from my own view.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah. Councillor Palmer.
I was going to say, I'm quite happy to second that. I think Angela's quite right in some respects. I think you're right, it does need broad in mind, but I think it's an example of making and rushing in and saying we're going to get this through, not realising what the attachments are to it. That should have been changed at the time. But I think I'll second that proposal, if that's all right.
Yeah.
And advice from Angela.
Okay, were there any other?
occasionally I can come up with it.
Good.
Anything else, anyone? Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, if you're asking Robin, and he's kindly volunteered to do things which would potentially be referred to the Constitution Working Group, then it ought to be in conjunction with the chair of that group, which I will declare interested.
I just say, if I may,
Yes,
so because the code of conduct is actually owned by this group, and indeed that's the arrangements for code of conduct complaints. So it's actually it's within the gift of this committee in the way that the member of the protocol to be done by this committee because it's a standards matter and therefore it's within the gift of this committee rather than the Constitution Working Group. So I don't think it is one for CWG, Councillor Baldock.
No, it isn't.
Oh no, if it's not coming to us, then that's fine. I'm not touting for work.
Okay, well, we can take that as a proposal, given that it's been Councillor Palmer. So if there's no other contributions, we'll take a vote on that proposal. That has been seconded. In favour? Is it unanimous vote? Okay. So any other business? There was a suggestion.
There was an appetite to talk about what members of this group like as training. So
So yeah, I've got a couple of any other businesses. First, I think we all benefit from having panel training. I think like there's been I've had panel training. I know Councillor Hunt's had panel training and yourself, Councillor Wise, but I don't know who else has had panel training. Instead of doing it one by one, it would make sense just to do one big panel training.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I was looking at, because I'm sad, I was looking at the other policies that might relate to go to this committee, and I don't think our vexatious complaints policy has been updated for a little while, so it might be worth looking at vexatious complaints.
does that belong to this committee?
Well, imagine it would have an impact on the committee, wouldn't it? Because if there's vexatious complaints against the councillors, then that would impact a standard steering.
It would depend.
So I just, if I may,
Yeah.
just thinking out loud, but a vexatious complaint wouldn't get as far as the standards committee by virtue of the fact that it was vexatious.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough, but I think we should probably have a policy we should make that policy, shouldn't we? And make sure that we're happy with it.
I think I'm more than happy to go away and look and see if that's within the gift of the.
Yeah. I think it has potential to be impactful, doesn't it? So it should be something we should maybe look at.
I mean, sorry.
Yeah, no, please.
Responding back to
Yeah.
it. Potentially, interestingly, that goes to the comment just made about arrangements, that potentially that's something that goes into that conversation about where you have a complaint that's vexatious. Because I think actually the wider council vexatious complaints policy, I think is actually about complaints about the council rather than about councillors.
Yeah.
But I'll check that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find, it'd be interesting.
So we can take forward the thing about panel training. I think that would be helpful. Were there any other suggestions from members? Yes. Councillor Harrison, then Councillor Perkin.
With the panel training, not in isolation, but as a group, would you open that up to the wider council laws. I mean, obviously you'd asked everyone on standards, but I'm thinking is, I mean, I'm here subbing tonight. I could sub long term if you're very lucky. And then I might need training on various things, mightn't I? But I'm not on the committee, so I probably wouldn't be invited.
No,
So,
the panel's
so
drawn
would you-
from the appointed committee.
yeah, but if I was subbing for a 6 months.
The hearing panel must be drawn from the standards.
Okay, so say I'm appointed to this committee for the next 6 months because somebody's off long-term sick. They're not, by the way. Well, no, they're
be done by council.
no, they're not. Pardon? No, appointments are made by the leader of the group.
Right.
So I'm going to be on here for the next 6 months because whoever is off long-term sick. But I've just, you organised this training, which is in 3 weeks' time, and I wasn't actually invited to take part because I wasn't physically on the committee at the time. So all I'm saying is, would you widen your pool of people that you invite to do the training
I see.
on the off chance that they are, end up on here? That was all.
I mean, I can't see why not, because obviously, I mean, it's been said before, hasn't it, about training opportunities being something that most members might wish to take advantage of. And because committees can change from time to time, that should be how we consider it. But that's all. Any training that we come forward with, ideally.
Good.
Councillor Perkin, you
I
had
think
something?
it's just, I think it's also helpful for anyone who finds themselves on the other side of the standards panel to know what the processes are. I think that's always, it's just a helpful thing for people, isn't it? The other thing that I was going to raise was that previously in the committee we were speaking about looking at kind of standards champions within groups and kind of mental health safety training and that kind of thing, just as an informal thing to help with internal conflict resolution. That hasn't, I mean, I've not heard that that's been resurrected at all since the new administration. I was just wondering whether there was any scope for that coming back, because I think there was quite a lot of work put into it originally and it's died a death in the middle.
Yeah, I can't see why not. It's not something I was aware of. So yeah, if I could have any ideas around what that entailed just beneath that, and we can look at taking that forward. Yeah. Anything else from anybody? So there were no other items for AOB? No. Okay, well then that's the meeting closed at 20:03.